The barrel of the gun pressed hard against Ray's lips, its cold steel biting into his skin. His breath came in ragged gasps as the man towering over him, his face smeared in green and black camouflage paint, whispered, "Open the door, or I'll blow your teeth through the back of your head." Ray's fingers trembled as they fumbled for the keys. His whole body was shaking, partly from fear, partly from the early autumn chill that still lingered in the air. He could barely comprehend how, in a matter of minutes, his routine Wednesday morning had turned into a nightmare. Just 15 minutes earlier, Ray had been on his usual route to the bank, sipping his too-hot coffee, mentally preparing for the cash transfer that happened every week at the same time. The security van was due soon, the same as always, bringing with it the armored guards and a suitcase filled with money. Nothing out of the ordinary, until today. As he approached the bank, he noticed 3 men stationed outside the front entrance. They were big, really big, and dressed like soldiers. A large banner reading "Veterans Fundraiser" was strung up behind them, and one of them held a donation jar. Ray stopped in his tracks, feeling an uneasiness crawl up his spine. The soldiers' camo face paint, coupled with their broad frames, made them look more like commandos than charity workers. But Ray had learned to brush aside that kind of gut feeling. It wasn't unusual to see veterans holding events for charity, and besides, they were probably harmless. He even fished some loose change from his pocket and dropped it into the jar, offering a forced smile as he met the eyes of the man holding it. The soldier was at least 6 feet tall and built like a tank. His eyes, a piercing shade of dark brown, didn't soften even when he smiled back. "Thanks for your donation," the man said, his voice low and gravelly, like it had been through too many packs of cigarettes. Ray nodded, barely managing a nervous laugh, before he turned toward the bank doors. That was when the voice called out, "Hey mate, you dropped something." Ray spun around, eyes widening when he saw one of the men walking toward him, holding up what looked like a leather-bound filofax. Ray shook his head. "Not mine," he said, his voice cracking slightly. Before he could say more, the man was on him, shoving the barrel of a gun into his mouth so fast Ray barely registered what was happening. "Now, open the door," the man growled. His hand pressed down on Ray's shoulder, and despite Ray's average height, he felt like a child in the presence of these giants. The passerby walking on the street behind them, oblivious to the unfolding horror, continued their morning routines. No one noticed a thing. Shaking, Ray unlocked the bank door, his heart slamming against his ribs. His mind raced through the security protocols he'd memorized over the years, but they all seemed useless now. These men weren't playing around. The leader, the one who'd shoved the gun into his mouth, was quick to act. With Ray now helpless, he signaled the other 2 men, who picked up the long rectangular boxes that had been hidden behind their donation stand. Ray didn't need to see what was inside. He already knew. These weren't fake soldiers. They were armed to the teeth. He was going to die in a robbery. Inside, the bank was eerily quiet, and Ray's thoughts scrambled, his mind torn between wanting to escape and accepting that there was no way out. One of the soldiers tied his wrists with cable ties so tight the edges dug painfully into his skin. He winced, but didn't dare cry out. They were professional, quick, and brutally efficient. "You know what we're here for," the leader snarled, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow cutting through the air like a blade. "Where's the vault?" Ray stammered, trying to recall what he'd been trained to do in a robbery situation. Delay them? Keep them talking? But as he looked into the eyes of these men, there was no mistaking their intent. They were here for the £3 million, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill him if he got in their way. He pointed shakily to the corner of the bank where the vault was hidden behind the paneling. The leader barked orders to his crew. "Get the code. We've got 20 minutes." The men forced Ray toward the vault door. His mind spun, trying to think of something, anything, that could buy him some time. Maybe if he gave them the wrong code, the alarm would trigger. Maybe... "Don't even think about playing games," the leader growled, sensing Ray's hesitation. "I don't need you alive for this. I can get in without you." That shut down any thoughts of resistance. Ray swallowed hard and gave them the correct code, his mouth dry as sandpaper. One of the men punched it in, and Ray heard the familiar beep of the vault unlocking. The heavy door creaked open, revealing stacks of cash piled high on metal trolleys, the result of weeks of transfers and collections. The sight should have been reassuring. His job well done. But now it felt like his death sentence. The robbers moved swiftly, pushing the trolleys toward the back door where their getaway van would be waiting. Ray, still tied and shaking, watched as his bank was looted before his eyes. His mind kept circling back to one question. Why him? Why today? His thoughts were cut short as the leader grabbed him by the collar and dragged him toward the open vault. The realization hit Ray too late. This wasn't just about the money. They couldn't leave him alive to tell the tale. With a vicious grin, the man shoved Ray inside the vault and slammed the door shut, plunging him into darkness. Ray's screams echoed in the confined space as the locking mechanism clicked into place, sealing him inside. For a moment, Ray's mind went blank. Then panic took over. He clawed at the door, shouting until his throat was raw. But it was useless. He was trapped, alone in the silent dark, while the robbers made their escape. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. His breathing became shallow, the air thin and stifling. He closed his eyes, trying to calm his racing heart. And then, was it his imagination, or was there a faint, ticking sound? His eyes snapped open. The bank's emergency lock system. Ray had forgotten about it in his panic, but now, as he focused on the sound, he remembered. The vault was designed to relock after a short delay if the incorrect code was entered, but it also had a backup release mechanism, a small panel near the back wall, if he could just reach it. With his wrists still bound, Ray crawled painfully toward the wall, dragging his body across the cold steel floor. His fingers, slick with sweat, groped for the release switch. Time felt like it was slipping away, each second dragging out in endless silence. Then, click. The door hissed as it unlocked. Ray staggered to his feet, pushing against the vault door with all his strength. It groaned open, and he stumbled into the empty bank. The robbers were gone. The money, gone. But Ray was alive. He collapsed onto the floor, sucking in the cool air, his mind still racing. It was over. He didn't care about the money. All that mattered now was that he'd made it through, and somehow, against all odds, survived. The police would arrive soon. There would be questions, investigations, maybe even news coverage. But for now, Ray let the relief wash over him. The worst was behind him. Or so he hoped.